Michael, hello, sir.
Hello.
How are you doing this evening?
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule on this Friday high day night. You and I actually just met on Monday, talked for the first time. We were introduced, and you've been nominated by a gentleman, Eric Rosen, after talking to be an honorary member of the CaliSensi Growers Association. And after talking to you on Monday, no, I'd heard good things about you from Eric and enjoyed some of your posts. Lo and behold, little did I know what would happen on Monday. After talking to you on Monday, that was like the beginning of the bromance. And we could have talked like all day long. And I had to stop you and be like, bro, do you want to mentor? Will you be a mentor? Will you be an honorary member of the CaliSensi Growers Association to mentor and help train the next generation of growers, ganjés, and cannabis aficionados?
I would be honored to, Ryan. I would love to be a part of what you're building here.
Right. And I'll say, after we talked, I was elated. I literally couldn't shut up because I was so excited to hear some of the stories that were coming out of your mouth that literally my solar plexus was going to explode, and I had to take a few deep breaths. So as we discussed, part of your initiation to the lifetime membership, due to your lifetime dedication to the beautiful plant cannabis and our mission of connecting people to the plant, we have concocted a great idea called CaliSensi Stories, of which we tell the story of the connection to the plant of wonderful individuals like yourself, who folks may not have heard of, because it's this connection that shall help connect the next generation and more people to the wonders of this plant we know as cannabis, or some call Mother Ganja. Are you ready to tell us about your relationship with the sacred ganja, Michael?
I am. I very much am.
First question. Not really a question, but rather storytelling time. Please describe to us your relationship with cannabis from the start until now.
Absolutely. Everyone has their early experiences with cannabis. So, high school, everyone was experimenting and trying different things, but it wasn't really until I went to college, and I actually got a chance to go to The Hague in the Netherlands as part of the International Criminal Court Tribunal. And yeah, it was amazing. We had an opportunity to spend a week there, and a friend of mine that was also planning on going with me had this brilliant idea to just tell everyone that actually the class was 2 weeks long and not 1 week long, and spend the first week in Amsterdam and get ourselves a good cannabis education before we went on with the rest of our ICC education. So we spent that week in Amsterdam, and it was eye-opening. Previous to that, the cannabis that we had seen, that I've been exposed to, was very similar to what we call brickweed or beasters, things that were immature, very poorly grown, no flavor to it. It was an entirely different experience going to Amsterdam. The only way I can compare it is to say I used to smoke weed every day, and then I went to Amsterdam and I smoked one joint there of White Widow, and I lit a cigarette on the wrong end. It was that high. Deep inhale,
I've heard that one before from cannabis.
That was an entirely different experience. So I also had the opportunity to go back the next year and spend a couple of weeks there, actually, and spend time in the hostels and really live at the coffee shops and check them out. And when I came back, I really couldn't get back used to smoking what they had in the underground dealers and illegal guys anymore. To the point where I basically stopped smoking weed when I came back from Amsterdam, because what was being presented to me was so far from what I had gotten accustomed to as weed.
Now, where was this? Was this in Montana?
This was, in Massachusetts. I was going to college in Massachusetts. Yes.
Oh,
so at
a place that
Hampshire
actually
College.
fine cannabis now. Okay.
Yeah. Now it's a big cannabis state, but back then
Right.
2004, 2005, it was a different story. It was a lot of really, really questionable weed. And it was also the time of weed where you would smoke and get headaches afterwards and have strange flavors and crackling to it. And you really wondered what had been happening to it before it got to you. So either way, it was funny because most people describe going to Amsterdam as turning them on to weed and getting excited about it. I had quite the opposite experience. And when I came back, it was hard for me to smoke anything at all. It wasn't until I went back to Montana, and I actually finished college in Montana at the University of Montana. And the medical marijuana laws had just started getting passed in Montana around the time I graduated. And this was in around 2008, 2007. And I was actually working at a preschool outside of college. Right after I finished, I had a degree in liberal studies, and I had a lot of experience working with kids. So I went into early childhood education, and I really enjoyed it. I only spent a couple of months doing it, but pretty quickly, I got to know the director of the school really well. And she was a cancer survivor and was actually going through treatments. And I was the young guy at the preschool, and she approached me to get access to cannabis because she felt really strange going into one of these new stores or trying to get herself cannabis and buying from someone. But she knew it could help her out a lot. And so that was kind of the beginning for me of getting radicalized into the cannabis industry, was the director of the preschool and supplying her and her other old lady friends and a couple of other people that I didn't really know, just being essentially an intermediary between the quasi-black market of the medical days, early Montana scene, and the people who are trying to access it. So I went on from there pretty quickly to working full-time at dispensaries.
You're a caregiver in training. That was back in around 2005, huh?
That was it. Yeah, that's when we used to call ourselves caregivers. So the medical marijuana law in Montana like to classify you as caregivers and patients and link people up together. It had a very weird way of doing this. So people were almost trapped with whoever they had listed on the card. And it was also very difficult to find anyone in the first place. So my first experiences buying weed through the medical program, I got my medical card by going to what they were calling these traveling cannabis exhibitions at the time, where they would rent out a ballroom or the office area of a hotel and book a couple of hotel rooms, and they'd bring a doctor in, and they would say, if you'd like your medical marijuana prescribed, you have to show up at this hotel at this conference room, and you'll take turns seeing the doctor. And you had to bring your medical records with you. These were the early days, so it was really exhaustive medical records you had to bring with you, to the point where you had to be, it had to be a situation where your doctor would recommend you for it if the stigma wasn't there. And it was literally just a different doctor who was either from out of state and was able to prescribe in Montana, or didn't really care so much about the reputation. A few doctors ended up really getting it, coming back and having this bite them in the ass because they were trying to provide compassionate care for a lot of Montanans, but instead it looked like they were just writing a lot of cards, being disproportionately providing access to people, and it helped to ruin the scene. There was a couple of high-profile individuals who were organizing these so-called cannabis caravans. And very quickly, the entire industry got out of hand. It started out as a really incredible scene that was really open to anyone. It was the most mom and pop, young, enterprising situation I'd ever been a part of, where with literally just a few lights and a dream and some skills, and you could take your product into the retail store and you could sell it in the store, and they would sell it to patients. And many times these were actual medical patients. So you could see your weed actually improving people's lives. And for me, it was one thing to sell the product and get a paycheck off of it was incredible to me. But on the other side of it, seeing that I wasn't just selling anything, I was selling something that was helping people who were coming in a wheelchair, and a week later they were coming in a walker. Working at the dispensaries radicalized me in a way that nothing else would, because I had people wheel in barely able to hold a joint, saying this was the best part of their day. Hell, this was the best part of their life, coming in and picking out the weed that they could smoke and at least feel some kind of relief. I got to innovate in that situation. My first job at the dispensaries was actually as a joint roller, because most of these people had no way to smoke it themselves, and they didn't have
Right.
pipes and bongs back at home. And in fact, most of them were in assisted living or nursing centers, so they couldn't even go home and smoke it. So they needed a way to consume it that was portable and easy for them. So I was rolling joints for these people of the weed that they were buying. And not only that, but the ones that had trouble holding it, a lot of them had trouble with their grip, or arthritis, other issues. So I actually had plastic forks, and I innovated by having the plastic fork joint holder. So I would hand them basically their joint on a plastic fork as they wheeled away on their wheelchair. And some days there were 3 or 4 people on wheelchairs wheeling away from the store with lit joints on a plastic fork. Those were the best days. It was an incredible early experience. I worked at quite a few different dispensaries around there and grew for quite a few of them, until a couple of us got really, really ambitious, banded together, and opened up a warehouse. And that's when we really failed. None of us understood anything about building or permitting, or even about growing anything at scale. And as anyone will tell you, you learn best when you learn from failing. And up until that point, we've been able to cover over a lot of our failures, but it wasn't even a very big warehouse. We're talking, maybe a little over 5,000 square feet. But just being able to purchase out the lights and build them in.
That's huge back then.
Yes, at the time it was considered massive, but we were completely unable to turn a profit off of it. Just being able to pay the rent on the space at the end of the month, each month off of what we were growing, was considered a massive success for us. We struggled, and pest problems, genetics problems. This is the time when I learned that you can't buy a pack of OG Kush seeds and grow them all out and expect to have a bunch of OG Kush plants. We did so much seed testing because, frankly, in Montana, you just couldn't go and pick up clones. Everything you had was either from some elite old school grower, which frankly, most of the time were crap because they had just been on their own, isolated for a long time, or you were stuck growing from seed and finding your own. So we did a whole bunch of pheno hunting. We did a whole bunch of falling on our ass and failing, until finally we started to scrape things together near the end there, about a year or two later. But it was around 2011 that the feds came into Montana and shut down all of the major medical cannabis producers. It was pretty traumatic for most of us that were in the scene, because the guys that they busted were the ones that had been the most compliant, the most visible, the ones that had hosted tours for state legislators through their gardens. And most of us had done business with them at some point. So our names were all linked and associated. So even though they didn't bust everyone in the scene, it was a good way to put everyone on notice and say it wasn't going to be tolerated in Montana.
Oh yeah, it works.
Yeah, so it was really scary. They used the information that we had submitted to the state for our licensing, for how many patients we had, plants we had, paying taxes on the product we were selling, for the search warrants that the feds were submitting. So they knew exactly where to go and what to get. There was a real sense of betrayal among a lot of the growers that had come out of the woodworks and now were seeming like they were going to be prosecuted again. So I wasn't ready to live with that. I had never been part of the scene when it was illegal. It was always something medical for me to help people. So when things went into the black market, I quickly found myself kind of like a fish out of water. And I started looking at Washington and the scene that was shaping up over there at the time. I sold everything in Montana, moved over to Washington, and started one of the first recreational cannabis businesses in the state. I built the facility from the ground up and bought a piece of land outside of Spokane and founded Green Matter. It's a good friend of mine. It was just purely designed on high efficiency. We were experimenting with all kinds of things that were brand new at the time, from rock wool, cocoa quard, LEDs, stacked cultivation, water cooled lights, all kinds of crazy things that people don't even mess around with anymore. Hydrogen, clay, expanded clay pellets, different types of mixed media. We pretty much did it all. And we had a great opportunity there to innovate and to trial out a bunch of different techniques that you really can't do when you're at scale and your costs are so high, especially when you're managing a bunch of different people. it's not really easy to run your facilities full R&D, but that's basically what we did. And because it was the early days of the Washington marijuana scene, the prices we were getting were absolutely crazy. We were one of the first people to be on the shelf. So we got into Uncle Ike's in Seattle, which was a major retailer, and we're able to go on the top shelf initially and just stay there. And it helped to buffer a lot of the initial ups and downs of the business, just to have a constant sales channel. There was still plenty of hustling that had to be done of building the brand and getting around to different retailers and having plan B and plan C on hand, because I actually didn't get my processor's license in Washington. I only got my producer's license. So I was stuck having to go through the producer processors, who were exactly the same as me, except they were allowed to package their weed and sell it direct to retail. So what I had to do was not only sell my weed to retail, but find one of my competitors and be able to convince the retail store to take their weed as well, so that they would also package my weed as part of the sale and get it into the store. At first,
my goodness.
this seemed like an incredible obstacle that was incredibly unfair, but I tried to turn it around to my advantage and used my inroads with all of these other companies to launch a consulting business. And I eventually did consulting with some of these larger companies that were interested in learning about A, why my product was in such high demand on the shelves when there was not, and B, how I was able to produce it at a lower cost than what they were doing. In many instances, all that I was doing was looking at what was being done already in strawberries and traditional agriculture and bringing it over, and not treating the plant as something magical or special like we did in Montana. In Montana, we tried every silver bullet you had, flushing with orange juice in the last week, a week of darkness, anything and everything that we'd ever heard of or read about on the forums, and none of it did us any good. In the end, it came down to trusting yourself and running true scientific side-by-side trials and reading from people who are doing similar agricultural activities in different sectors that are a little more reputable. So had great success doing that. Consulted with a couple other companies until I eventually went down to work with.
What years were these?
Oh man, so we're talking, this is
legalization.
What?
Was it at legalization?
Oh yeah. This is 2014, 2015. Yeah. And this was in the height of the market in Washington. So things were actually doing really well around that time. And that's when I went down to Pullman, Washington, and worked with a business down there to build their company up from scratch, essentially building out 10 flower rooms on 2 levels, 10 light rooms, so we could alternate between, with a veg room that was capable of feeding it in mothers with just one strain, Purple Kush. Just went crazy on Purple Kush. I had figured out early on that if you nail one unique cultivar and you're able to get some unique characteristics of flavor and appearance, you can essentially own that category with your retailer, especially in the early days. So when next time someone goes to sell them some purple weed, they say, I've already got purple weed. It's better than what you're bringing. So it was a way to.
There with the purple punch at my old corporate job. Oh, your purple punch is the best we've ever seen. We already have 3 versions of it on the menu, though. Sorry.
That's it. You had to be first
keep
there.
Keep going, Michael.
Yeah, if it was good enough, then that was basically it. So we ran with just one strain was our strategy to corner the market on there, and it went incredibly well. Obviously, it's much easier to be running one strain than it is to be running a dozen different strains, and you can dial in the environment and the production cycle much more closely. The issue was we were located next to an airport. This was down in Pullman, Washington, and eventually the airport wanted to expand and exercised an eminent domain clause against our building and purchased it. So I had actually been given equity by the other owners in exchange for the work bringing the company up, and I sold my equity back to the owners and said, you guys can give this another shot. Many people who are involved in it but aren't actually doing it, investors, people on the side, they will often underestimate how difficult it is to start one of these businesses, which can be good and bad. So the bad side of it, of course, is if you are expecting someone to pat you on the back and tell you what a good job you're doing and tell you how appreciated you are, it's not going to happen. They're not there. They're not putting in the hours. They're not going to see it. They are putting in the money, so they expect to be appreciated for that. But on the other side of it, you have a better view of what's actually happening on the ground or not. So knowing the true risks that were involved and how lucky we were to get that facility up and running and hold that space as it was, I was able to part ways on a very positive basis with the previous owners and move on to my next experience. And that was down in Oregon.
Ooh.
Yes, I moved into retail again, get back in touch with my retail roots. I, through a friend of a friend, had made contact with a married couple that was, they had a small medical marijuana dispensary that had gotten one of the first licenses to operate recreationally in Southern Oregon. And they were anticipating a lot of volume coming through their store because they were located right next to the highway and had billboard signage right up on the highway as well. And they needed someone to come in and help them build teams and work out compliance and, quite frankly, to work out their inventory and purchasing, to be able to handle the product coming in, to determine how much to pay for what weed, how much weed to buy, how much they could expect to sell through. It was a lot of these basic, simple questions that had been problematic for them as they were going through the transition. So I came down to help implement a POS system, bring them onto the compliance, traceability, and build some teams and bring some cannabis knowledge into it and train up the bud tenders. And I really enjoyed the initial part of it. I really liked being back in the retail store and connecting with people. But what I found was that it was a very different retail experience from what I had in Montana. In Montana, I had people in wheelchairs and walkers lining up to come into the store. In Oregon, in Medford, I had people who were borderline alcoholics and drug addicts that, we had to have a sign that said no needles in front of the store kind of thing to make sure that we weren't attracting too much the wrong kind of attention. But it was a different experience. I ended up dealing a lot with the most problematic customers, vendors that were struggling to get by. In Oregon, a lot of the outdoor producers were really squeezed, especially early on as overproduction happened. And I often found myself in a difficult position, feeling like a grower myself, having to bargain down on prices because there was so much competition and I couldn't justify buying this product at a higher price when I could get the same or better product at a lower price from someone else. Yeah. It was a good experience to be on both sides of the counter. In Washington, I had previously been just trying to push. And in Oregon, I was trying to moderate out and say, well, maybe we'll only take a pound and see how it sells. And maybe we'll take another pound. Right. Telling a grower who has 20 pounds that you'll take 1 pound sometimes is a slap in the face. Other times, they're grateful to make the sale. It really depends on the situation they're in and how you talk with them. Right. It was a full experience there. I got the whole gamut. And at the time also, I enrolled in business school at night so that I was learning a little bit more, getting a more formal education in how to run one of these businesses.
Whoa, is this your MBA?
Yes, yep. Yeah, I had learned the hard way in Washington how little I truly knew about running a business. And even though I was lucky and made it out by the skin of my teeth, I knew there was a lot for me to learn, and there were a lot of people that had credible knowledge that I had to pick up before I could go back to being at the helm of business again. So I got a chance to trial out a lot of different leadership strategies. Obviously, the first one, when you're put in charge of a dozen people in retail, is to be the mean boss, where you're constantly angry and yelling at people and firing people, turnover. And it was terrible. Quite frankly, I made a terrible situation at work there before.
It sounds like Friedman economics there, buddy.
Yeah, I finally had to look around and see I was reaping what I was sowing. I was so concerned about not being seen as the boss or of losing control that I was overcompensating. So luckily, I was learning a lot about servant leadership at the time, and I changed my point of view to trying to be more of a resource to the employees. And it worked out really well. It's funny that when people aren't
ladies and gentlemen, Michael Nevas, a real true leader.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
They have to believe that you're there for them. That if they're not there, you're not there, and that we depend on each other, that we all have a job.
You can't fake that, can you?
That's right. That's right. So it was a great experience for me to transition there into a different style of leadership and to see the impact of it. And I was lucky enough to have an opportunity after a year there, things had settled a bit, to move back into cultivation and to actually take the helm as a production manager at one of the most advanced agricultural production facilities in Portland, called
Whoa.
Proof Cultivar. Yeah.
Oh, Proof. Oh, you
Proof.
worked with Mr. Plum.
Jeremy Plum.
Maybe he was
Yes.
your successor or something. I don't
Yes,
know.
head
too
of
much
production
personally.
science. Yes.
I had a little interaction with the Proof Cultivar group when a year or so into Caliva, where they are very strongly in favor of organic production.
So
Very
yes,
strongly in favor, as
that
am I.
was
But
that was
very
something that I actually had butted heads a bit with Jeremy on. So Jeremy came on later. When I first came on board, I came on as part of a triumvirate of me coming on with the cannabis operational cultivation experience, a woman named Lee who was coming on with more traditional agricultural experience, who worked at DS Cole and other nurseries for many years, and a guy named Todd Saucy, who I consider a mentor, that had worked with Microsoft for many years, incredible organizational leadership skills. And
Wow.
the three of us were coming in to essentially right the ship. When I came in, you had people walking around with garden hoses attached to submersible pumps sitting inside of trash cans. If water, walking around wheeled just to water plants. It was in need of updating. There was a lot of issues and a lot of workflow issues and operational issues that needed to be changed quickly. And we moved in and were able to really successfully transform the place from being a money pit into being a tight ship that was mostly automated. And instead of being run by a lot of master growers, we had a lot of cannabis technicians who were experts in their field, whether they were integrated pest management specialists, or whether they were processing specialists, or whether they were irrigation specialists. So we had trained in different methods. And one thing we found was that when you move people from these generalist, okay, you're all growers, into having more specific roles, was you get a little more ownership, you get a little bit more of this feeling of professionalism, and they get a feeling like you know what you're doing. Like they're not just supposed to hang out and wait for you to say what to do. You can actually assign them an independent role that you have confidence will work the way that it's supposed to, and you can step away and let them do their job. And when you give people that autonomy, that independence, and the capacity to do their job properly, it's incredible what people will do on their own without needing someone to stand over them and shout at them to trim faster, because in cultivation teams in particular, and also in retail teams, it's not about speed. It's not even necessarily about quality. There's no way you can track how many leaves per minute a grower is removing, how effectively they're pruning each plant, whether or not they're defoliating, whether or not they've actually sprayed the underside of every single leaf. You can't afford to walk around behind them and monitor that. If you do, you got the wrong person hired for the job, because you have two people doing a job that one person should be doing. If you can get to the point where you train people and specialize them in what they need to do, they want to do it. They'll want to show off what they can do, and they'll want to grow in that position. So I learned a lot about putting the right people in the right spot. A good example of that is there was one employee there that was really slow. I mean, the guy was just always the last person to finish whatever we were doing, but he was really methodical. He would never forget anything. He would never leave anything out. And
sounds like cannabis.
Yeah, he constantly came up as an issue. And after the first couple of months there, I had the opportunity to switch over and open up a processing center, because we'd increased our yield so much. Our previous drying and curing area was no longer sufficient. So we actually had to move into an entirely different building to open up new processing and drying. And I tapped this individual to come over and help as the lead. And he did incredibly well at it. His attention to detail and his patience were really well received by the trimmers. I worked with subcontractors mostly for trimming. And dealing with subcontract trimmers is a whole different beast from dealing with full-time employee trimmers. Full-time employee trimmers, I've never managed successfully. The amount of turnover that you have, the standards that you need to hold, it's not trimming used to be a career, but now it's really more of a transitional part-time job for most people. And the best way to structure that is generally as a temp position. If you give people, trimming is one of those positions where there's not going to be a move up. You're not going to move up the ladder in trimming where you get so good at trimming that eventually you're going to make $30, $40 an hour doing your trimming. At one point that was true when you could trim 5-10 pounds an hour, but eventually you reach a certain point where it doesn't really matter. It's mostly mechanized where we're removing almost all of the leaves and they're really just hand finishing at this point. So we're looking to get as much as we can of specialized people as employees to build actual full-time crews, and then people that are turnover that churn through, you need to have them as separate crews so that they're not, this might sound terrible, but poisoning your full-time crews. You have to have a trusted crew that knows that they're specialized and will always be there, that can rely on each other. And then you can pull temps out of your cycling crew of trimmers and temporary garden labor to pull onto your full-time crew. But I've seen a lot of cultivation crews go wrong by trying to maintain a certain amount of turnover. And in my experience, cultivation crews are too tightly knit to handle a high degree of turnover. Even retail crews, it's not necessarily good for them, but they seem to be operating more independently. When you're looking at a cultivation crew, you need to trust the person down the line is working at the same pace as you, and you develop this unspoken form of communication that's really important to let them build. So really good learning experience there on what that was like. And I got to expand on that a lot more when I went down to California, because now not only was I using temps for trimming, but I had to use temps for field labor as well. And when you go outside, they don't call them
for field labor.
Field labor, yes, they don't
Okay.
call them temps anymore. They call them field labor contractors, or FLC.
Well, yeah, I am in California, don't forget.
Right, so you know what I'm talking about.
Right. Well, yes, of course.
Mm-hmm. So initially, these smaller crews of temps were easier to handle for trimming, but then you move on to a larger crew of 30 or 40 people working through 2 or 3 different subcontracting FLCs, and a lot of these crews barely speak English. We're looking at any time when you're doing a harvest of over 100,000 plants across 2.5 acres, coordinating the activities of 30 to 40 different people across 12 different major tasks that have to be happening, generally with 5 or 6 different vehicles that have to be transporting material to different parts around the ranch. So I would say that Proof Cultivar was kind of my phase 1 of learning about materials resource planning, where to move product around in order to get the best success, building teams. And genetics were part of it, but not as big of a part of it. But then down in California, I was taking it to the next level and saying, how do we drop costs per pound, not to $200 or $300 per pound, but
now what were you doing in California? I don't know if we heard that.
Oh yeah,
so growing cannabis, we know that.
I'm jumping ahead here. You're right. Okay, so
well, I don't know who you were working for. If you can tell, if you can't tell, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, no, I can. It was Outpost Cannabis. When I moved down to California. Yeah, we're in Santa Barbara County. We're one of the first to get licensed. And we did a lot of ounces into LA almost exclusively. And I started the operation up from, it was a 1,600 acre ranch that I moved on to there to help the owner plant a couple acres of cannabis. They had looked at the industry originally and had tried to decide if they were going to get involved. And then originally we're going to look at doing kind of a toe in the water and put.
I think I might know this ranch, brother.
And then said, I said, you know what?
Bonilla,
you got acres here. It actually is cheaper to grow by the acre than it is to grow by the foot. So the first year was an incredible learning experience for all of us of shifting outdoor. So
I think I actually even know the story of this ranch. I'm not even joking. It's in northern Santa Barbara County, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Because I went to school in San Luis Obispo.
Oh, cool.
And lived there for 15 years.
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
I swear to God, you hired the same guy I used to work, or someone hired the same guy I used to work with to eventually run the crews on that ranch.
Oh, man.
His name was Bonilla. Anyways.
Yeah. There was a there was a couple of different people that had been brought in. I was there for almost 4 years. And in the beginning, a lot of it was just learning how to get plants to grow effectively outdoors and how to drive.
Right. Oh man, he called me one year and was like, he's calling me, hey, Gabacho Loco.
Oh, insane, absolutely insane.
I don't know if it's the same ranch, but they ended up on the second year with botrytis. They tried to do a late season winter crop and ended up with just botrytis throughout all the buds. And
all of us have done that.
Yeah, he said, what can we do? And I said,
that's it.
There's nothing you can do now.
Oh, we had to try so many different methods, but in the end, the real winner was we would do auto flowers. We'd do 40,000 an acre, so 80,000 autos in the spring, and then we would do our full season, and then switch over to autos again in the fall and do replanting and harvesting.
I can't believe this is the same ranch, brother. Small world of cannabis.
It's a small world. It is.
It is the ranch.
So it was very educational. I really enjoyed it. I loved working outside in the sun and working with a basic. I mean, I would call it a small farm. Most people would never call 2.25 acres of cannabis a small farm, but in the perspective of California outdoor, it's just a drop in the bucket. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that style of growing, really more than anything else. Being out on a tractor, working on the field was wonderful. I didn't like so much dealing with the irrigation issues. It was a whole different situation.
Hey, I got to stop you there. There's a reason we call it irritation, not
there irrigation. You go, right? The irritation issues. Oh,
I'm just teasing. Oh yeah.
No, man. No. The headline for my irrigation situation would be the trouble with dribbles, where it just starts with something small and then it's like, oh, it's just a little leak, it's just a little something here, and then it actually turns into a flood, and the flood turns into a bigger flood, and before you know it, you've emptied out 5,000, 10,000 gallon water tanks, and the plants are wilting and need to be watered. So you get a lot of creative troubleshooting going on, a lot of problem solving.
Was that using buried drip tape?
Oh yeah, but the problem with that is that if you're transplanting, they won't reach the drip tape until after a couple of weeks of growth, 2 to 3 generally. So
right. That's why strawberry growers tend to use overhead irrigation for the
overhead. Yep. Or what I've seen people doing is they're just shifting to running out drip lines and just using drip stakes the whole year through and supplementing with the tape, but tape is problematic with the planting machines as well. So we used a water wheel transplanter, and the way the water wheel works is, it actually punches the hole in the soil to plant the plant into, and placing the tape can be a very imprecise activity when you're burying it in these raised beds. So what we had,
it depends on the ground preparation before, but I also know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, I did a lot of ground prep, and
on these coasts of California, we do have a lot of clay soils, which can be cloddy and can cause small pinhole leaks.
You had to be creative, but it was great. I mean, it was a really cool experience. We worked with Dark Heart for a lot of our genetics, and we worked with Purple City Genetics for a lot of that time. That's when I got to know Eric really well. He came on and helped us, guide us in a lot of our genetic decisions, and ran a couple of trials, and that was really cool. And we dealt with him.
Eric, I've never met anyone like Eric in the industry. When he came on to Dark Heart, I mean, I had purchased many batches of clones from Dark Heart, and then this guy came on, and I'm just like, and we got a batch, and it was actually, there were problems with it, but he fixed it all. I mean, he fixed it in a way, and he was so professional, and then we stayed in touch. I mean,
I was impressed to the point where when he shifted over to Purple City Genetics, we went with him. We were actually invested in the account manager there in the company.
I would have stayed with him if I would have needed clones. I definitely stayed in touch with him.
It was great. We had, I mean, California clone scene, it's hard to say anyone was truly clean or reliable. A lot of them,
man, even today. Even today, Ryan said it right here. Nobody. I know a few that are pretty clean.
Yeah, they try.
I hear all the stories. People tell me.
It's still a problem. You know, the viroid was hit us pretty bad.
Oh,
We had to
man.
deal with, we had huge crop losses on some of our outdoor products. But you know, in the end, everyone is facing that problem now. It's going to be part of the evolution of the industry. And there's a lot of growers are going from seed outdoor now, in part to take advantage of just the vigor that comes from going from seed, but also to avoid.
Right. You get the tap root. There's a lot of different things. The vigor itself.
Yeah, they're more
Especially if it's an
resistant to
F1,
the photo
the true F1
issues.
hybrid.
Yeah, in California, depending on where you're growing and when, you can have photo period issues. So one year we actually had our crop start to flower still in July, and then flip back into vegetative state again before going back into flower. And that was because we
Oh, yeah. Early strains will do that.
Mhm.
So strains that tend to finish by the end of September, 1st of October.
So that's what we found, is that early strains, we call them early, they don't actually flower faster. They still take as long to flower, but they're more sensitive to the photo period changes. So it's easier for them to
Well, they
flip
may
over
flower
back and
under
forth.
13 or 14 hours.
So in the same field, we would have one block of plants of one strain that were flipping back and forth, and another block of plants that were flowering just fine. So it was an interesting learning experience in that respect too, of what these choosing the right genetics for the right situation.
Totally.
It was educational, but you know, it was really heartbreaking to see what was happening near the end, to watch the prices per pound steadily drop and the market shrink, and watching these larger companies start to acquire a lot of these small farms that couldn't make it anymore. And that's actually what had me start to look at other options. Was
Is this your California experience?
Yes, yeah, the outdoor, the price per pound for outdoor has been steadily dropping, and it's being pushed down pretty hard by these large glass house operations that are producing higher quality flour at a
glass house operations, but not the brand, right?
Right? No, I'm not going to point out anyone in particular, but I will say that there are huge expansions happening of very high quality flour.
Man. You know, as the founder of the California Sensimilla Growers Association, and as someone who has met Graham and toured Glass House before, they do grow good cannabis.
Incredible.
But I will also say this: where you worked in Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara in general, and here in Monterey, south of us in Monterey County, by skirting the limits on the canopy, it did essentially ruin the whole premise of trying to prevent large farms from coming into fruition.
Completely did. It completely did.
Totally destroyed it. So
the irony is now they're allowing large
about that, but
they're allowing large licenses
growers, and I will say that was kind of unfair. And when that happened at the state, I'm not going to blame the growers.
No.
We set up a system that tried to prevent vertical integration, that essentially made it so everyone takes a cut off the top and makes it impossible to make money for the producers.
Yep.
Hello. So no, I'm not mad at the growers and the business people.
No, and when you do that, Ryan, you set it up so that only the high volume guys can actually make it work. It's the Walmarts and the Targets that can only take a tiny margin off of each pound sold and still make it. When you're not selling that many pounds,
I mean, I think what hopefully we may see, and sorry to interrupt your story here.
No,
it may end up evolving just like the Canadian market, where the big booth makers come in and drop the price, and they make one type of product, and then the craft people end up that barely survive, or the one, and that is already happening actually. We're going to start a new series of that. It's called Desperately Seeking Sensi. So we're going to feature some plants.
Good, because when I was actually to move on to the next one, when I was at Cookies on my next career move on
Cookies.
I had experience.
Bro, you built like every cannabis company in the world.
Right? I had experience with outdoor California cannabis companies, and that's where I really saw the difficult position they're in. When I was on the side of trying to sell, I saw a lot of pressure. It was really difficult for us to make sales near the end there. When I went over to Cookies and started to coordinate the movement of this outdoor flower into these retail stores, is when I saw the price difference, the quality difference, the the California market is so strange, so bizarre, so incredibly localized. So in one area, the market might be one way, in another area, the market might be another. So an example is outdoor flower. If you go to LA, the market's not there for outdoor flower. What they want is they want the indoor, they want the highest quality. You can sell for the highest possible price there. But you go to the Bay Area, you bring some really good outdoor. There's a lot of outdoor appreciators out there. You go further up north into NorCal, yeah, there's a lot of people who almost request it.
Well, I like it all.
It really was about matching your location. So there was another company that we were familiar with called Old Pal that was doing really well, that was selling outdoor flower in large quantities in NorCal, and had essentially taken over the market up there. And they were doing.
Just say this: Kaliva and Old Pal were married at one point for about a year, so I saw all their flower packed. So I'll say no again.
I could see it. They're huge, and they're doing the volume play, and that's what I've seen with a lot of these bigger guys, is they're able to drop their margins and make their volume through. And that didn't work well for Cookies either, because Cookies is working on a high margin situation where we're looking.
They're supposed to be the ultra premium.
Only the best at Cookies. So many times, if it was outdoor, it just had to be the highest quality. And there was one company that we worked with, a really high quality outdoor producer in Mendo, and I got to know them really well and visit their farm. And they were having trouble basically making payroll. Year after year, they were seeing this steady decrease in the market and the prices and the demand. And I was put in a situation there with Cookies as well, where there were a lot of farmers, a lot of growers I wanted to help. I wanted to pick up the whole 20 pounds of the strain that they were growing, but the market simply wasn't there. And so we were left many times just picking up much less than what the farmers actually had available, trying to aim for wider diversity and product quantity. But, it's a difficult market for farmers in California right now. Really is. I got to see that firsthand. And after a while at Cookies, I spent a lot of time doing product launches there, sending out new strains, getting genetics into the hands of cultivators, working with tissue.
Now, were you a consultant there, or did you have a title there?
I was a operations manager there. So I did
Awesome.
crop planning and logistics. I did
Bro.
Yeah, a lot of project.
You don't even know how many people
work.
wish they were in your shoes, even just for this one position, man. This is awesome. You keep going now.
Yeah, it was exciting. I got to learn a lot about the genetics, and I got to talk with every member of the Cookies cultivation network, and tour a lot of these facilities and learn about what really makes this highest quality product, and what the difference between cultivators who succeed and those who don't. And so more recently, I've taken that knowledge and actually started my own small consulting company with a couple of other professionals called Solid Spade. That's really just dedicated to helping ideally small, medium-sized businesses meet a lot of these operational efficiencies that they frankly don't have time to get to anymore. The early days of the industry, you had a lot more leeway. You could take a year or two to figure things out, try and get your genetic mix down, to try and see, do I need this person or not? Now you have to be able to hit the ground running. The assumption is that you've already learned a lot of these lessons. So what I enjoy most is helping people who are aspiring to grow cannabis, or current growers, be able to compete in this market that's becoming increasingly centralized. We try to push back against these monopolistic forces, and to help small growers in particular find core competencies that the big growers can't, to be able to find market niches that are unique to them, and to be able to capitalize on that. So for example, outdoor growers. It's one thing to say, well, big guys own the outdoor scene. Obviously, it's easier to grow outdoor at scale than it is on a smaller scale. But when you start talking about the drying and curing of outdoor, that's when it gets trickier. To dry and cure an acre of outdoor, you're looking at 2,000 pounds of dry flower. You're looking at over 20,000, maybe 30,000 pounds of wet flour. You're talking about removing 15, 18,000 pounds of water. You're talking about transporting materials and products over huge distances and coordinating crews on very tight timelines. So if, for instance, your whole 5 acres is harvesting at the same time, you're going to be limited into what you can actually harvest for smokable flour, depending on how quickly your crews can harvest and how much dry space you actually have. So even though you may only have 2 acres, if you can actually harvest the whole 2 acres for smokable flour, you can actually compete with some of these bigger guys that are harvesting 10, 15, 20 acres, because most of them aren't able to actually take in smokable flour. And in many places like Santa Barbara County, they're cracking down on drying and curing facilities. And so you're seeing a huge expansion of this live extraction where people can't even dry their flour anymore. They're just taking it as fresh frozen and literally sending it through machines that are capable of extracting the terpenes and the cannabinoids out that way. That's another niche market that I've seen that's grown dramatically. It's another way people have been able to compete.
Right. And you smoke weed, right? I think I forgot to mention that part.
I haven't smoked weed in many years. I developed a pretty bad allergy to it. The grower's allergy, to the point where if I even try to smoke it, I'll sneeze like crazy. Just lights me off. But I am an appreciator of fine oils. I love what they've been able to do with extract these days.
What's your favorite type of extract methodology?
I mean, I'm a huge fan of dabs and dabbing. I do like.
No, but what type of dabs? Rosin?
OG Kush, of course. OG Kush and some
no
deep
rosin, resin.
Everyone calls it OG Kush. That's nothing. So let me rephrase that. Some deep myrcene, some deep. I like deep citrine, heavy. I like ones that have a lot of pinene, a little bit of that nice piney flavor in there. Not a huge fan of that spicy beta caryophyllene Jack Hare flavor, but what I really like is being able to see a lot of these old school genetics, Jack Hare, Purple Kush, Super Silver Haze, being redone and reworked and brought into the new lineups of genetics that are coming.
Redone and reworked. You just essentially defined my genetic theory of how to make a genetics portfolio, at least part of it. Well, I think I got you a little off track there. So
no worries.
You were the production manager at Cookies, and this was in 2018 and 19?
Yes, operations manager over.
Operation manager.
Yep. So I did a lot of coordinating of getting products to market, just moving.
You know the homie Omi?
That's it. I was the hookup. I was talking to the growers saying, what do you got? When are you going to have it? How much are you going to have available? And working with the retail stores to see what we would want and what was selling at the time. And working with marketing, creative on their advertising, and the most incredible people I've worked with in marketing creative at Cookies. Everyone thinks they have their marketing creative is the best, but I would say at Cookies, that is one of their core competencies. I've never come across a more talented crew of marketing and creative people.
That's how they built their company, right?
It absolutely shows. That's one of my big pieces of advice for any of these aspiring companies is, anyone can grow wheat. At this point, it's coming down to the point where genetics are everywhere. Good growers are everywhere. The products are everywhere. You can damn near download a manual online. There are companies that just sell grow pods and spaces, Agrify, things that just try to literally autopilot the whole thing for you. The problem.
Those are picks and axes that we don't need.
Yes. There's debatable, right? But the problem people come up against is actually selling weed in the marketplace. And that's where I think a lot of growers get it wrong. They don't look at sales until they've actually grown all the product and produced it. And they grow what they think the market should buy rather than reacting to where the market is. That's my...
It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I've been there where, we have 400 pounds of this strain.
Yeah, we don't really need that.
It's indoor,
Yeah, to focus
But
less
not selling.
on what you're capable of. Too many growers are obsessed with their yield per square foot, with the
Oh
total number
God,
of strains that they've grown, with
I'm
how
tired
quickly
of
they can
yield per
cycle
square
them
foot.
through.
Well, I'm not tired of it. I love it too, but
I mean, we all love talking about it, but in the end, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is not how many grams per square foot. There's a certain cultivars you can grow, certain facilities that can be designed. You spend enough money,
right. But all the cookie strains were 3 or 4 pounds of light. You told me, right?
well,
I'm
yeah.
just
So
I'm
that's
just
exactly
teasing.
it, Ryan.
No, and as someone who's grown for 22 years now, going on 23, I understand that
Yep,
it's not always 3 of light for all the cultivars.
that's it.
The
And
best
so it's
ones
not
often
about.
yield less because nature has a way.
That's
Nature
exactly
has a
it.
way to make us appreciate, and that's okay. We don't need to
That's
crop
exactly
steer
it.
to oblivion.
And
We
you know what's
can,
also funny about that too, Ryan? I've seen people, so at Cookies, I had the opportunity to give different growers the same strain and see how they performed. And rarely do you ever get that opportunity to actually look at not just how they said it did, but the metric reports to see the actual yield results off of it and to look at the actual lab test results. And many times it was a lot more complicated than who necessarily yielded the most, because you had to look at, for example, how much the pound cost. Some growers were able to produce the same pound for much less than other growers, even though they yielded less. Others had higher THC percentages or terpene percentages, even though their yield was less or the cost per pound was less. So I like looking at production facilities in terms of how well do they produce profits, quite frankly. You have to look at it as a whole picture. If you look at it just how much weed can they produce, that only tells you part of the picture of how successful that facility actually is. So that's my big advice for aspiring growers, anyone who's looking at owning business or cultivating. Don't look at how much you can produce. Don't look at maximizing your production capacity. Those things will come. They do. Ends up happening. What you need to look at from day one, before you've ever grown a gram, is where it's going to go. Who's going to buy it? How you're going to package it? How you're going to brand it? How you're going to get into the marketplace? And building a consistent following so that every month you have the money in to grow more weed.
nice. So could you tell us the name of your consulting company one more time,
Yes,
please?
it is a Solid Spade.
Solids,
www.solidspade.com.
www.solidspade.com. And are
Yep.
you allowed to say who your partners are in this venture
Yes,
or what they
yes,
do?
I am. I'm partnered up with Amanda Dolly. She has a lot of experience in NorCal and old school cannabis experience. And she works with a couple of different growers right now in California doing administrative consulting for the most part, SOPs, workflows. And Brian Zimmerman, who works with Raw Garden, Central Coast Agriculture right now, and runs their cultivation compliance and traceability program.
Oh, wow.
The three of us, we come onto a business and we'll basically look over if it's an existing business, we'll look over operations,
Brother,
documentation, staffing, genetics, and
the
make
breadth of the
recommendations.
skill sets amongst those three individuals sounds tremendous and synergistic, to say the least.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. We try. We try.
I think
You
you've
know,
learned how to build a team by now.
yes, our big pitch is really that we're not coming at this from the ivory tower. This is from dirty boots on the ground, being able to tell you how many boots you should have in each task, how long
Yes.
things should be taking, how much things should be costing, and if there are better ways to do what you're trying to do. A lot of times it's about problem solving, and I love problem solving. So it's been the most rewarding for me has been to move into consulting and to be able to help small and medium-sized businesses. These days, I'm focusing more on New York and trying to help some of these aspiring hemp farmers transition into growing cannabis, or current hemp farmers transition into growing cannabis for the recreational scene over there. A lot of
Right.
them are wondering how things will be different, what it's like to bring product to market, and are focused again on just producing, on being able to create the product, when even though we're a year or two out from having heavy competition, if you're already laser focused on getting your product sold, then it's never going to be a problem.
Yes. Well, they'd be lucky to have you, man.
Well, thank you, Ryan.
Well, man, that was quite overwhelming. I just got to take a minute here. Okay, now I'm good. Is there any, is is that come to the end of your, that sounds like quite the story.
That's the end of my journey as a consultant. I mean, my last major point would be about where I'd love to see the industry go and where I think it can still go.
No, that's the second question, man.
Okay, all right. I'll let you get on that one. No, this
is
is the journey. That's the whole
Are you ready
journey
for the second question?
from the beginning to now.
That is an awesome journey, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. The second question is, where do you see this industry going? This godforsaken, beautiful, no, this awesome, lovely industry that is somewhat fragmented, struggling in some areas, and compare and contrast that to where Michael Nevas would have it go. Like your utopia industry.
All right. So I currently see the industry headed towards a lot of consolidation because of financial and regulatory pressures. And it's not necessarily just in the cannabis industry. I see it in larger industry in general. It's becoming progressively harder to compete. One of the biggest reasons for that is volatility. As volatility increases, it becomes more important to have, quite frankly, cash in the bank to be able to get through lean times. And the more volatile things are, the longer these lean times can be, and the shorter the sales times can be. And the companies that are either well capitalized enough or are efficient enough to make it through those lean times stand to gain huge. They can do really, really well. But the problem is very few companies have access to the type of capital that are required to get through that, because there's no access to banking right now, or the traditional loans that would get good businesses through. If there was access to banking, if good business owners could make a strong presentation based on financials and be able to get bridge loans and be able to afford basically to plant for the next season without having to sell all of their inventory that they had grown from the previous season. It is an impossible task. It's never done. At the end of every year, there's always unsold inventory from the previous year that just has to get discounted until it finally does get sold. It's a very cash-heavy operation. So the consolidation happens as companies inevitably run out of cash at the end of a month if they're not able to make payroll, if they're not able to pay taxes, if they're not able to get enough money to put plants in the ground. That's basically the end for them, and they end up selling their licenses and their assets to larger companies that are able to endure these challenging times. Now, I don't want this to happen because it's kind of a it's I hate to say it this way, but it's anti-American, Ryan. Part of the issue is that it's not taking advantage of the financial markets in America that really differentiate good businesses from bad businesses. If a bank deems you worthy of a loan, generally that means you're a good enough business where you should have a shot at survival. And right now, businesses just don't have that option to make that presentation. There are private, what I would call vulture investors out there that will take large percentages of your company and ask incredible rates. Or if you're an MSO, a multi-state operator, a large one, I've seen them get 11, 12% interest rates on multi-million-dollar cash deals. And you have to wonder, when you're looking at the top 12, 15 of these biggest multi-state operators, and they're consistently posting losses, not just small losses, massive losses year after year, and continue to operate. How can a small company compete against a large company like that that's willing to endure year after year of these epic losses, where they're selling products for a loss underneath their margin and undercutting their competitors? It's an unsustainable situation. The remedy to that, the easy solution on there, is to open up banking for cannabis businesses.
Yes.
It really eliminates this unfair David versus Goliath situation where these big companies have all of the advantages and little companies don't, and will allow banks to actually come in and even out. It's funny to think of bankers as the good guys in this situation. However, access to capital is critical. If you talk to any small business owner, whether they're a restaurant owner or a cannabis business owner, they need to have that access to those credit lines to survive.
Without access to capital, most people don't even start. Or most companies will say.
Exactly.
You heard it right here. Michael Nevas and Ryan Brantley. It is un-American
That's
to
right.
prevent cannabis companies from using safe banking.
Let
President Biden, this is
us
in
use
your
the
hands.
banks. Yes,
Come
let us
on.
bank. That will fix the industry. It won't. That'll fix one of the bigger problems, which is the consolidation in the industry. The other issue with the consolidation that's happening is you have one guy in charge of these massive. There's a lot of responsibility being centralized in 100,000, 200,000. I've seen a 500,000 square facility that was run by one person as the director of production. And you have to wonder at a certain point, we're going to hit a limit when you can't just have one director of production who's very highly paid and a bunch of minimum wage employees who work underneath them. And what we're hearing from consumers pretty roundly is the quality sucks. We're seeing in retail stores is they're unable to turn a profit. So we know the model doesn't work. We know that if small business owners were given the ability to compete, they do have a workable model. We just need to get banking so that we can get lending involved. That's my utopia, where good small cannabis businesses can get access to lines of credit so they can compete and expand and take advantage of the market as it grows.
Yes.
That's
I
it.
support that. I support that utopia 100%. And that's actually what we're doing here. Believe it or not.
I love it.
We are supporting farmers by sharing your story, and your experience is unique and quite remarkable, to say the least.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, I've been trying to, I haven't even gone into growing outdoor in Montana. I have 1,000 other experiences, Ryan, but you know, if you talk to someone who's been doing this for long enough, as I know you have with many of them, it becomes a question of what's most important for people to know. And I think some of the most important things for people to know, to hear about in this series is that a lot of us have been involved in this because we're passionate about it, because we love what we do, and because we think it makes a big difference, and we see the potential for larger change that can come with it. A lot of the people that get a lot of the news stories are ones that are only interested in the money. And don't get me wrong, we all need a paycheck. We've all got to get through it at the end of the day. But there is a larger feeling within a lot of us that have been in the industry for many years of being sidelined as we put in a lot of the work and the advocacy and the time to build these genetics and to build these processes, and feeling as these industry matures, like there's not really a place for us. And so that's where I'd love to see the industry move as a whole, is to bring in legacy farmers, to allow people who've previously been a part of the industry but didn't have maybe the capital to access it, but have an excellent business plan and experience and opportunity, and to get access to that capital.
Let's make that happen together, man. That actually leads us perfectly into the third and final question, which is, as an influential cannabis person as yourself, what advice, and you kind of did allude to a little bit of it, but what advice would you give to aspiring cultivators or folks that just want to get into the cannabis industry in general? Like what do you have to share? What knowledge would you say, this is what I want to share with you?
That is a tough one, because I would say if you are already down the track in the cannabis industry, I would say don't give up. That
Yes.
it's not a straight line. Most of us have gone back and forth from holding top level executive jobs to going right back down to the bottom rung to going right back up again. You never know where you're going to land, and a lot of it is about being in the right place at the right time with the right skill set. You can't will the right position to open up for you. You just have to be available for it. That's my advice for someone who's already in the industry. For someone who is not in the industry, that's thinking that they'd like to get involved, I would say, if you think you're going to, it's excellent if you're passionate about it. If you're already growing weed on your own and all you want to do is be around growing cannabis and cultivating it, absolutely. Go into it and check it out. Try it, learn a little bit and explore. But if you're getting into it as a way to make a lot of money, if you see it as a quick and easy career path, as a way to avoid having to go to school or having to build skills, you're completely wrong. It is a situation where you will hit a wall very quickly. As we talked about with trimmers earlier, the same situation holds true with a lot of garden laborers. If you don't have a certain skill set, certain credentials, you'll never be able to progress beyond a certain point in the industry. So my advice for people who haven't been in the industry yet, that are looking to make money off of it, is build your credentials that will be valuable for people in this industry. whether that's automated irrigation, environmental control systems, whether that's working with genetics and plant botany, pathology, entomology, whether that's
Yes.
working, getting your MBA or working on the business side of things, whatever it is, try to build skill sets that will be valuable to people in the cannabis industry that they won't already have, and make that transition in from the side, because moving up from the bottom is really just for people who are going to do it no matter what. Passion.
Man, that is some priceless advice. And you reminded me of someone had a quote I heard over this last week that says, yeah, everyone wants to be a farmer, but no one actually wants to do the farming activity when it gets
That's
down.
right.
So yeah, it's hard work. Develop your skills, but it's education or specialization. That's the path, man. I appreciate all that you've shared tonight and everything, all that you offer as mentorship, and as we continue to build out these CaliSensi stories, maybe offering more advice through the website. You know, we discussed that, and hopefully bringing more people into your consulting business. That, man, I want to hire you guys.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. And man, really appreciate what you're doing here and bringing this group of people together and trying to spread the knowledge and trying to support each other. Because I think that's something we've all been wanting to see and wanting to be a part of. So I think you're getting a lot of positive buy-in from a lot of us.
Yes, and the vision is to bring folks together in the industry who, it could be OGs, it could be, you know, folks with MBAs, it could be professionals. Just so happens that you and Eric have both been great, smart business folks with MBAs and OGs and professionals. And man, your professional story, that's one of a kind, brother.
Well,
I am
thanks,
so
Ryan.
grateful. And a mosquito just, apparently it's nighttime. A mosquito has just buzzed my ear. I think my daughter left the door open, but I do appreciate all your time, sir, and sharing your story. And soon you will be wearing some swag and spreading the vision of CaliSensi and you know, cannabis that's grown for smokability. I appreciate all the things you shared, talking about how it's not all about the profit and it's not always about yield. And you kept alluding to the things of what we founded this company for, is that good cannabis should be good to smoke. That's what's driven the connection between the people and the plant. And it's that passion by so many people. It's not the money. Well, yeah, it's the money for some, but that's not why we all were willing to grow in our closets and risk our livelihood. It's because we love the plant. We love the effect. It's life-changing. And that's how we seek to continue to create more flower to change more lives and to create more fine cannabis. Show some class. Don't grow biomass. Grow fine cannabis with the method of CaliSensi. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. This has been wonderful. I appreciate your time as well.
Yes, sir. Let's keep in touch, and we'll talk very soon, okay?
Terrific.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.